Hello, and welcome to the Is It Just Me podcast. I am your host, Dr. Angie Inge. This podcast will entail truthful, transparent conversation about everyday life and the lessons learned. This podcast is for everyone from teenagers to the elderly. Although some topics discussed may be rated R, every conversation is based on living life and learning life lessons. Today's discussion, we're going to talk about generations and how things have changed over the course of each generation. Before I begin each podcast, I like to state this disclaimer that I am not an expert in everything that is being discussed is the independent opinion and reality of myself. Now, when I say we're going to discuss generations, we need to break down some things in generations. And when I say generations, I mean the silent generation, the baby boomers, the Gen X, the millennials, the Gen Zs. For those of you who are not familiar with the generations, I'm going to explain what type of generations they were and how things have changed over the years. And maybe we could try to get some clarity on what's going on in this crazy ass world today because life has been life for everyone, but it seems like things are so different now than from when they were when we were growing up and from when our parents were growing up, etc., etc. But we have to also look at the different things that have transpired because change is inevitable. So stuff is definitely going to change. But do you feel things have changed for the better or for worse? And in my opinion, I feel like some things have changed for the better, but some things have definitely changed for the worse. And depending on who raised you, the age of the person who raised you, you may not have known it until you've gotten older that our parents didn't do everything the correct way. And they may have instilled some very toxic, trauma filled things in us that we didn't realize until we got older, until we started having kids, or until we started looking at things from a different perspective, or we received the knowledge that was considered to be trauma. The silent generation would most likely be like my grandmother's age. And I don't know everyone's, age, but I'm 43, I'll be 44 this year. So my grandmother would have been someone that was born in the silent generation. And the silent generation is basically considered, as it states, the silent generation. Everything was whatever goes on in this house stays in this house. We don't discuss our personal business outside of this house, outside of certain family members, because all the family members weren't privy to everything that was going on, just those close knit family members. They more so did the you do as I say, not as I do type of thing. So that was the silent generation, and they birthed the baby boomers. And the baby boomer generation would have been considered the generation that my mother would have been born in. And they're more so the independent, self assured people who, when they were being raised, they were the people who like rioted and protest for civil rights. And they opened people's eyes towards social attitude and social change. I'm not saying every baby boomer, but I'm just saying in that generation, that's where that came from. So, as opposed to the silent generation who just took whatever you gave them and made it work, whether it was right or wrong, good or bad, they just dealt with it. The baby boomers were more so the individuals who were going to be like, no, this is not right. This is not, you're violating our rights. You're doing this, you're doing that. So now, where did the change come in? Now, baby boomers also were the generation that would tell you, oh, just make sure you go to school, finish school, and you get a good city job. Take all the city tests. Like they were content with working a 9 to 5, being able to provide whatever it is that they can, and taking care of their family, looking out for their kids, and those type of things. Not saying that they didn't have the mindset to be homeowners and things like that. And this is not for every baby boomer or every silent generation. This is just for some of the majority, because of course there's always exceptions to everything. But they were the ones who basically instilled in their children, oh, make sure you go to school, get your high school diploma. When you graduate high school, take the city test, work a city job. So they were like the workers, the one that instilled for you to work so you could be independent. Now, the baby boomers, they birthed Gen X. Now, depending on the research that you do when you look up, Gen X can be anywhere from 59 to 43 to 44. It depends on the year, 1965 to 1980. Sometimes they might say 1981. It depends. But for the most part, Gen X. I would be considered Gen X. I was born at the end of 1980. I have a mixture of Gen X and millennial in me because I was born at the end of Gen X. The millennials started in 1981. I was born in December. I'm at the end of the year. But Gen X are known as the quote unquote middle child generation. To be known as the middle child generation is comical because you already know what they say about the middle child syndrome. The middle child is always the one that just don't give a fuck about nothing. They're going to challenge everything. They're going to question everything. It should be, they're known to be the more resourceful child. And for Gen X, it's typically described as resourceful, independent. You're good at maintaining a work life balance. Gen X is the first generation to grow up in the personal computer stage. So when we were growing up, computers were introduced. So a lot of Gen X individuals, most of us, are computer literate, computer savvy, tech savvy. So Gen X, the children of the baby boomers who are more independent, who their mothers taught them, go make sure you go to school, you have your education, you get the job, you do this, you do that. And a lot of generational curses were passed down from the silent generation onto the baby boomers to Gen X. Now, when you got to Gen X, we're the generation where we question things. And we're not going to just take what you're giving us. I mean, stand up for what you believe in. Then we get to the millennials. Millennials were born from 1981, 1996. It depends on where you get your research from. These are the individuals that are 43 to 28. My daughter is a millennial. Now, these are the children that were born into the technology world and are considered more progressive and creative. And they're very confident in themselves and they're very confident with technology. They're not the type of individuals who just want to work for someone. These are the individuals who are going out and they're stepping outside the box and they're not listening to your parents. Not literally, when I say listen, I mean they're not doing the traditional, oh, I'm going to go to high school, or I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get a degree, I'm going to find a job. These are the most up and coming entrepreneurs. Yes, there are entrepreneurs that are older, that are baby boomers and Gen X, but the majority of the up and coming entrepreneurs are millennials. They have this attitude that they don't want to work for anyone. They want to do it their way. They want to figure it out. I don't know everything, and again, I'm not an expert, so this is all my personal opinion, but I feel somewhere along the line, we lost the millennials because the millennials that are coming up, I'm going to make sure that I stay healthy for as long as I can because I don't want them taking care of me. They have this self entitled attitude, the majority of them, I'm not going to say all of them, where they feel like once they hit that age of 18 is I'm grown and you can't tell me nothing. I'm going to do it my way and I'm going to figure it out. As opposed to learning from the mistakes of others, because that's how I was taught. My grandmother said, wise people learn from the mistakes of others. So if your grandmother told you, don't touch the stove, it's hot, I burnt my hand, why would you touch the stove? It seems like millennials have to touch the stove for themselves to see that it's hot. And I'm not saying that that's wrong because sometimes you have to go through life to learn life lessons on your own. You cannot learn everything through everyone else. I get that. But it's the entitled attitudes. So, with the entitled attitudes, of course, we have to step back and we have to self reflect on how did these kids get these entitled attitudes because they're the children of the Gen X. But before I get into that, we're going to go into the next category in the next generation, which is Gen Z. Gen Z is 1997 to 2012, 27 to 12 years old, or 28 to 13 years old. These are the individuals who are known to be highly collaborative and they take a pragmatic attitude about addressing inherited issues. This is the generation known to face a lot of mental health challenges. They're considered the loneliest generation due to the endless amount of time spent online, festering feelings of depression and isolation. This is the generation that's really living through technology, living through social media. This is that generation. And then you wonder why they have a lot of mental health issues. It's because they're growing up in an area where everything is on display. This does not go for every Gen Z kid. If you notice, the Gen Z population, they have to post everything on social media. They have the Instagram. They're the generation that's really on Instagram and TikTok. Not really too much Facebook. Facebook is for the baby boomers and the Gen X. Might find some millennials on Facebook, but the Gen Z population, they'd be like, Facebook is for old people. Gen Z population is TikTok, mainly TikTok and Instagram. And everything is done online. Everything is for show. It's like they live their life through the perception of other people and how many likes they get or the comments for their outfits and things like that. Now, depending on the type of kid you have or the type of child that you're raising, Gen Z have mental issues, but a lot of them suffer from some type of anxiety. It might be depression, different things. Then we have to sit back and look at the generations that came before them and why is it like this? Change is inevitable. We know that things are going to change. So we went from, I'm speaking for myself, that we went outside and our parents didn't know where the fuck we was at. We was outside, walking the streets, hanging out, but you made sure that you got home before the lights came on. Your parents trusted that you was outside doing whatever the fuck you was doing, because 9 times out of 10 we were doing some shit we had no business doing. But our parents trusted us to be outside with no form of communication. They didn't know where the fuck we was at. But we made it back home safe and in one piece. We was good. The generation now for Gen Z, it's they don't even go outside. Their communication with everything that they do and their fun is social media, TikTok dances, and generating money on TikTok, starting business, doing all of that. They don't have that outlet like we had. We used to go outside, and I mean, we used to walk from 155th to 125th, back to 135th to 130th. Like we did those type of things. These kids don't do that. They don't even go outside. We played skellies, we jump rope, we did those different things. These kids don't even know what skellies is, and I don't even think they probably know how to jump rope. So as time changed, a lot of things changed, and a lot of parents change the way that they're parenting their children. Not to mention, we're not even going to get into how the government got so involved to whereas you can't really chastise the kid the way that you want to chastise your kid. Parenting in 2024 is definitely different from parenting when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s. And you have to look at some of those things along the generations and you have to say, well, was it changed for good or not? It's a lot of parents, they just want to be their kid's friend, and wanted to be their kid's friend, you raise a fucking demon seed, because a lot of these kids out here are loose fucking cannons. And you look at the generations before us, the baby boomers were the kids of the silent generation. So the silent generation was the generation, they really didn't talk about stuff. They didn't talk about sex. You knew they had sex because somebody ended up pregnant, but they didn't talk about sex. They weren't open about the sex life. They didn't tell you about, oh, when you get your period, this is what you do. They didn't tell you about certain things. So then we had the baby boomers, which are our parents. I guess they felt like, okay, my parents didn't talk to me about sex. My parents didn't tell me about my menstrual every month. My parents didn't tell me about the birds and the bees. My parents didn't tell me about proper hygiene and what I'm supposed to do. So I'm going to be the generation that teach that to my children. So the baby boomers, which is our parents, they spoke to us, some of us, some parents, I'm not going to say all of them. They told us about having sex and the birds and the bees and make sure you use protection. And when you get your cycle, this is how you're supposed to do it and how you change your sanitary napkin. And you're supposed to wash your face with a separate rag than the rag you wash your body with. These are things that we were taught because their parents didn't teach it to them. Now you have us and we're raising our children. And our parents whooped our ass. Let's be clear. We got our asses whipped, just like our parents got their asses whipped. they got whipped with a switch or a extension cord and things like that. Our parents might, some of them might have whipped you with an extension cord. You might have got hit with a shoe. My grandmother hit my mother's son with a frying pan when we were growing up. That's the type of shit that discipline and shit that transpired when we were growing up. So then we started having children, and then it's like, okay, I'm not gonna beat my kid. I'm gonna just punish you because I have too much trauma from being beat by my parent. So a lot of parents in my generation didn't spank their kids. They punished them, or they gave them time out, or they did little different things, or they didn't do shit at all. Or maybe they just cursed them out, or they yelled at them, or whatever the case may be. Then we have the millennials who started having children, and I don't even think a lot of millennials even beat their kids. They got this shit called soft parenting. And it's just like, well, what the fuck is soft parenting? Because clearly it's not fucking working for these kids. Gentle parenting, soft parenting, gentle parenting, all the same shit. In my opinion, it doesn't work. Soft parenting and gentle parenting are for gentle kids. Everybody don't have fucking gentle kids. Some of these kids need their ass whipped. That's just my personal opinion. And so the millennials turned it into, okay, no, I got beat. I did this. I'm not going to do this. So my children, I'm not going to beat them. I'm going to do gentle parenting, or I'm not going to chastise them at all. At the end of the day, what are you creating if you're not holding your kids accountable? And I'm not saying that spanking your kid is going to teach them all the time, because you have some children that you can whip their ass and they're going to keep doing what the fuck they want to do. And it's just like, okay, now we got to regroup and find another way to discipline. But it's sometimes when an ass whooping is warranted and you get your ass whipped good enough, you gonna motherfucking learn not to do that shit again. But as the generations changed, things started changing. Millennials, now the Gen Z, the younger, because they're young adults that are having children, these are the kids that their children are considered their best friends. I don't know how the fuck those kids are going to turn out, but in my opinion, it don't seem like it's going to turn out good, because from what I'm seeing from the individuals who be like, "Oh, that's my best friend. That's my best friend." What are you teaching your kid? How are you differentiating friend from parent? Because they have to know that you're their parent. And I'm all for you being friends with your children when they're older, when they're old enough to understand that I'm your parent. I can be your friend, but I'm your parent. When they're young, I don't feel like they can differentiate between friend and parent. But it seems as if these Gen Zs, that's what they're doing. These kids are having children and they're saying, "Oh, that's my best friend. That's my best friend." And they lack discipline. A lot of Gen Z parents, the young adults, they don't discipline their children. And they get mad if you chastise or discipline their children. Growing up, anybody could discipline us. It could be the neighbor, it could be your aunt, your uncle, your sister. Anybody could discipline us growing up. These kids nowadays, their parents is on some, "Oh, don't say nothing to my kid. Don't hit my kid. Don't this, that, and the third to my kid." And it's like, you see these kids that are out here? You see what the fuck is going on? Just because you don't want to hold your kid accountable and you don't want nobody to say anything to your kid, we got a bunch of loose fucking cannon kids running out here that are emotionally unavailable, don't know how to take rejection, don't know how to take no, entitled, feel like you're supposed to give them whatever the fuck it is that they want. They're supposed to get their way. Spoil you little bull-headed ass troll fucking demon seed kids, because they lack discipline and they weren't taught accountability from prior generations. And I'm all for changing the negative things from the generations before that were traumatic. Some traumas for one is not traumas for others. So I do understand that. Just like some people might feel like a spanking or whooping, getting your ass whipped is traumatic. For some, it might be. For others, no, it was a learning lesson. That wasn't traumatic for me. It was a learning lesson. So I get that. But at the end of the day, as we move along and each generation moves along, aren't we supposed to get better? Aren't things supposed to get better? Aren't we supposed to teach our children right from wrong? Aren't we supposed to hold our children accountable? Aren't we supposed to teach our children accountability? And it seems like somewhere along the line from the baby boomers to the Gen Z, it got lost somewhere. And I'm very well aware that there are some individuals who were parents young. And I always tell people that's not an excuse, because I was a young mother. I had my first kid at 16 years old. And I'm one of those mothers, for those that know me personally, I'm going to hold my kids accountable. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And I think somewhere along that line, that got lost in parenting your children. I'm that parent. You could discipline my kid. My friends could discipline my kid. Like they wrong, they wrong. Bust their ass if you need to. If I sent you over there, you're supposed to listen to them, follow their rules. It's the same how you respect me. I expect my children to respect other adults, family members, and so forth and so on. I don't know where along the line in our generation where some of the basic things like respect got lost. And millennials and Gen Zs, baby, the way that they be talking sometimes to their parents, I just be like, ooh, because my kid wouldn't have no teeth. And I know that the government is like, oh, you can't beat your kid, you can't abuse your kid. I get that. Abuse is one thing, but let me explain something to you. You're not going to dictate how I raise mine when I'm the one that's responsible for feeding, clothing, and providing a roof over their head. And a lot of millennials and Gen Z have this attitude like, well, I didn't ask to be born. Last time I checked, none of us asked to be born. That's not realistic. We didn't ask to be here. The issue is we're here and we have to live life accordingly. And you should want to live life to be a better person. And I don't know what the fuck is going on with these kids now, but they don't seem like they give a fuck about nothing. They don't seem like they want to live to be better people. They don't have no regard for other people's lives. And it's just so unfortunate that each generation, as you look and you go down the line, it's like, where the fuck did we go wrong with these fucking kids? Because it's really, really, really disturbing. You know, I'm all for breaking generational curses. It seems like more so some Gen X are breaking generational curses, but it seems like more so the millennials and the Gen Zs are doing it and they're going into business, they're opening their own businesses. You know, they're doing things the non-traditional way, and there's nothing wrong with that. You have to do what works for you. But when are we going to put the respect aspect for not just for your parents or for adults, but just for individuals in general as a generation as we move along? And it seems like somewhere along the line between the silent generation, between our grandmothers and these Gen Zs, something got lost along the way. And I don't have the answers because I don't know exactly what it is that should be done. I have children, and for the most part, I did fairly okay by my children. I'm a firm believer in you can do everything right as a parent, and your child can still choose to do wrong. So I don't want this episode to be I'm blaming our generation before us for the fucked up kids that are coming now. However, we do have to take some type of accountability for some of the shit that's going on with them. And I don't have the answers, but I do know that when I say we, I mean we as a generation, we have to sit back and look at how things can be done different so that we can have children that make better decisions and are being held accountable and are okay with rejection and things like that. At some point, and again, of course, life is going to be life. You're always going to have individuals who do fucked up shit. You're going to have individuals that do bad shit. I'm not saying that if we all teach our kids accountability, then maybe there won't be no bad stuff going on. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that somewhere along the line in our generations, a lot of things have changed. A lot of parenting has changed. You know, breaking the generational curses have changed. A lot of positive things have changed for the better. But some things have changed for the worse. And I just feel like we have to get back into, maybe we need to do a mixture of old school parenting with new school parenting when raising these kids so that maybe we can see if we can produce better children out into the environment, into society. My grandmother always told me, you're not just raising your kid for yourself. You're raising your kid to live out in the world amongst other people. And I think somewhere along the line, some parents miss that part, that they're not just raising their children for themselves. You're raising your children to be around other people and to go out into society and to be a productive, independent individual. So when you do certain things or you allow certain things or you don't hold them accountable or you condone a lot of things that you know you shouldn't, we start to have these fucking kids that are out of fucking control. So as time goes on and the generations change, as our children get older and the next generation comes along and the next generation comes along, of course we're going to see a lot of differences and a lot of things are going to be different. But some of the things that were good that we inherited from our grandmothers and great grandmothers, I believe it should have been continuously passed down so that we are birthing or bringing up another generation that's a well-rounded generation, knowledgeable, independent, they hold themselves accountable, and not so many of these self-entitled, enabled kids. I always say change is inevitable and things are going to change, but it seems like the more things change, the more things stay the same and not for positive things. And that's what I'm looking for in, each generation is some form of positivity. Our parents got what they got from their parents, and when they saw that it wasn't a positive thing, they made changes. Same thing when we learned things from our parents that we saw that it wasn't positive, we made changes. And that's the thing that needs to be taught moving from generation to generation. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Is It Just Me podcast.